There are moments that reveal more about who you are than years of reflection ever could. Not because they are logical, not because they are intelligent, but because they happen before the mind takes control. Right now, you are standing inside one of those moments. In front of you, there are 4 paths. They are not here as beautiful scenery. They are not symbols designed to entertain or decorate. Each path carries a different psychological weight, a different relationship with fear, movement, control, and identity. Before your mind starts searching for meaning, before it compares, categorizes, or explains, pause. Breathe. Let your eyes rest on the paths for a few seconds. Notice which one pulls you. Not the one that looks safer, not the one that seems more reasonable, but the one that awakens something subtle inside you. Curiosity, calm, discomfort, tension, attraction, or even resistance. That reaction matters. Alan Watts often reminded us that truth is not something you arrive at by force. It is something you notice when you stop interfering with the moment. The mind loves explanations, but reality speaks first through direct awareness. Do not analyze. Do not justify. The moment you start explaining your choice is the moment you move away from what this experience is meant to reveal. The unconscious does not communicate in sentences. It communicates through sensation, direction, and pull. It does not argue. It attracts. Long before you learned how to describe yourself, something inside you already knew what resonates with your nature. That is why this choice is not random. As you observe the paths, pay attention to your internal response. Perhaps you feel calm, perhaps uneasy, perhaps strangely familiar, perhaps resistant. Do not correct any of it. In deeper psychological observation, even resistance carries meaning. Sometimes we are not drawn to what is comfortable, but to what is necessary. This experience works precisely because it bypasses the rational mind and reaches a deeper layer of consciousness, the layer where instincts live, where silent fears operate, where unspoken desires quietly influence your daily decisions. Many people spend their entire lives trying to understand themselves by thinking more, reading more, analyzing more. Yet some of the clearest insights appear when we do the opposite, when we allow awareness to move before thought. Now choose. Do not announce it. Do not explain it. Simply recognize internally which path called you. Hold that image for a moment. Each path represents a different way of relating to life, to uncertainty, to movement, to inner freedom. No path is better or worse. They all reflect strategies the mind has developed to survive, adapt, and continue moving forward. This is not a test to predict your future. It is not meant to label you. It is an invitation to notice which aspect of you is asking for attention right now. Alan Watts spoke often about the illusion of control, the idea that we stand apart from life and try to manage it, instead of realizing that we are life in motion. The path that pulls you reveals how you are currently moving with or against that flow. In a moment, we will explore the psychological meaning behind the first path. You may recognize yourself immediately, or you may feel discomfort. Both reactions are valid. Self-awareness does not always bring comfort, but it always brings clarity. If this reflection resonated with you, write this exact sentence in the comments. I chose my path. And if you want to keep exploring these inner movements with clarity and depth, subscribe. Because understanding yourself is not about choosing the right path. It is about learning how to walk the one you are already on, consciously. If the first path was the one that drew you in, there is something important you should understand about yourself, something that often goes unnoticed in a world obsessed with control. This path represents a relationship with life that begins before explanation. You sense first, you feel first, and only later does the mind try to catch up. People drawn to this path are often described as intense, too emotional, too reactive, too sensitive, but that description misses the truth. What actually moves you is direct contact with reality. You do not experience life at a distance. You meet it head-on. Joy reaches you quickly. So does frustration. Excitement does not need permission. Neither does fear. Nothing passes through you quietly for long. Alan Watts spoke often about how modern society teaches people to mistrust their instincts, to delay feeling, to suppress impulse, to translate every inner movement into something socially acceptable before acting on it. But this path reveals someone who has never fully learned how to disconnect from that inner signal. Your body knows before your thoughts do. Your emotions register shifts in the environment long before words appear. There is courage in that, even if it has rarely been recognized as such. In a culture that rewards emotional containment and polished self-control, feeling deeply is often treated as weakness. You may have been told you are too much, too expressive, too driven by emotion. What is rarely acknowledged is that this intensity is also a source of vitality. When instinct is alive, life does not become mechanical. It stays real. The challenge arises when this force begins to lead alone, when every feeling demands immediate action, when there is no space between sensation and response, when emotion becomes the steering wheel instead of the signal. At that point, instinct stops being guidance and starts becoming weight. Emotional exhaustion, repeated conflicts, regret that appears not because you felt, but because you acted without pause. The growth required here is not suppression, it is direction. Alan Watts often used the metaphor of water. Water is powerful not because it resists, but because it flows, and yet when channeled it can shape entire landscapes. Your intensity does not need to be extinguished, it needs a container. Awareness between feeling and action, a moment of witnessing before movement, not to silence instinct, but to let it inform action instead of hijacking it. If this path resonated with you, you may notice that you often know the truth of a situation before you can explain it. You sense when something is off. You feel when a connection is no longer aligned. You react strongly not because you are irrational, but because something inside you has already perceived a shift. The work here is subtle but transformative. To ask yourself, not should I feel this, but what is this feeling asking me to see? Instinct, when paired with awareness, becomes wisdom. Emotion, when observed, becomes information. This path does not belong to the reckless. It belongs to those learning how to stand fully inside their own experience without being consumed by it. In the next movement, we will explore a very different relationship with life, one that does not rush forward, but watches carefully before taking a step. And if you recognized yourself in this reflection, write this sentence in the comments: I trust my inner signal. And subscribe if you want to continue exploring how awareness transforms instinct into clarity. Because the goal is not to stop feeling, it is to learn how to feel without losing yourself in the process. If the second path was the one that quietly held your attention, your relationship with life moves in a very different rhythm. You do not rush forward, you observe. While others react, you notice. While others speak, you listen. While others reveal themselves quickly, you remain still, not out of fear, but out of awareness. This path belongs to those whose inner world is deep, layered, and carefully guarded. You do not experience emotions less intensely than others. You experience them privately. Silence for you is not emptiness. It is a familiar territory. You learned early that not every emotion needs to be expressed to survive, that not every thought should be shared to be valid. So you built an internal space that is reflective, controlled, and safe. Many people misunderstand this. They call it coldness, distance, detachment. But what they fail to see is that this is a sophisticated form of sensitivity. You notice subtle shifts, changes in tone, unspoken tension, the meaning behind pauses. You sense what is happening beneath the surface long before it becomes visible. Alan Watts often spoke about how the ego believes it must constantly announce itself to exist. But awareness does not need noise. It only needs presence. Your strength lies in perception, in restraint, in the ability to remain centered while others are pulled by the current. Yet every strength carries a cost when it becomes excessive. What is not expressed does not disappear. It accumulates. Over time, this can manifest as a quiet exhaustion, a sense of being present and absent at the same time, a subtle loneliness, even when surrounded by people. Not because you lack connection, but because few truly enter your inner world. The danger of this path is not isolation. It is over-containment. When reflection replaces expression entirely, when understanding becomes a substitute for being seen. The growth here is not becoming louder, it is becoming selectively open. Not everyone deserves access to your inner life, but someone must. This path asks a gentle but difficult question. Who is safe enough to hear what you carry? Awareness, when shared consciously, deepens connection. Silence, when absolute, slowly turns into separation. If this path resonated with you, it may be time to allow your inner voice to exist outside your own mind, carefully, intentionally, without forcing it into places where it does not belong. Your wisdom does not diminish when expressed, it becomes embodied. In the next movement, we will explore a path driven not by stillness, but by transformation, a path drawn toward change, motion, and becoming. And if you recognized yourself in this reflection, write this sentence in the comments: I allow myself to be seen. Subscribe if you want to continue this exploration, not toward labels, but toward balance. Because awareness is not about hiding from the world. It is about meeting it without losing your center. If the third path was the one that called you, your inner life is shaped by movement. You feel most alive when something is changing, when you are evolving, when you sense that a chapter has ended and another is asking to begin. Routine drains you. Stagnation unsettles you. Even when everything looks fine on the surface, you can feel when something inside has outgrown its current form. This path belongs to those who are oriented toward becoming. You do not ask only, who am I? You ask, who am I turning into? There is a natural openness here, an ability to adapt, to reshape yourself, to move forward while others remain attached to what once worked. You sense endings intuitively. You recognize when it is time to let go. Alan Watts spoke often about the illusion of permanence, the idea that stability means holding things still, when in reality, life is a process, not a structure. You understand this instinctively. But even movement has a shadow. When change becomes constant, it can begin to hide something. A discomfort with staying, a resistance to stillness, a fear of facing emotions that require pause rather than motion. Not every transformation happens through speed. Some require waiting. Some require remaining present when there is nothing new to chase. The work here is discernment. To ask yourself, am I moving toward growth or away from something I do not want to face? Freedom and restlessness can feel similar, but they lead in very different directions. And then there is the fourth path. This is the one many people feel, but few choose consciously. It represents what has been hidden, suppressed, or misunderstood throughout your life, not because it was wrong, but because it was too much for the environment you were in. This path carries what Carl Jung once called the shadow, but through the lens of Alan Watts, it is not something to be defeated, it is something to be recognized. Unexpressed strength, unclaimed boundaries, desires you learn to silence to maintain acceptance, harmony, or safety. Those drawn to this path often sense they have always been different, even without being able to explain why. So they adapted, they softened, they learned how to fit. But what is buried does not disappear. It returns as self-sabotage, as repeated conflicts, as strong emotional reactions to certain people, reactions that reveal more about you than about them. Watts reminded us that the ego suffers when it tries to cut itself off from parts of its own nature. Integration is not about correction, it is about wholeness. If this path called you, something within you is asking to be lived with more honesty, not aggressively, not destructively, but without shame. And now, the most important understanding emerges. You are not one path. The choice you made was not a label, it was a signal. Each path represents a dominant force in your life right now: instinct, observation, transformation, or integration. But imbalance happens when one force rules alone. Instinct without awareness becomes impulsivity. Silence without expression becomes isolation. Movement without grounding becomes escape. Shadow without integration becomes sabotage. Alan Watts often said that suffering comes from resisting what we already are. Growth begins when these forces stop competing and start coexisting. Individuation is not a moment, it is a dialogue. You do not become whole all at once. You move closer to wholeness every time you recognize a part of yourself without judgment. Look at your life as it is now. Where do you feel tension repeating? Where do you feel stuck or confused? These places often reveal where one internal force has been ignored while another dominates. Balance is not neutrality, it is conversation. From here on, pay attention. When instinct arises, listen, but do not rush. When silence asks for space, respect it, but do not disappear. When change calls, question its intention. When the shadow appears, ask what it wants to show you. This experience was not created to tell you who you are. It exists to reveal what within you wants to be seen now. If this reflection resonated with you, write this exact sentence in the comments. I am learning to walk my path consciously. Subscribe if you want to continue exploring these inner movements, not to escape life, but to participate in it with clarity, awareness, and maturity. Because the path is not something you choose once, it is something you learn how to walk again and again with presence.